I'm Jessica Patterson, a 32-year-old woman who has dedicated the last 10 years to savings into a home that my parents assured me would one day be mine, and my profession as an. I was able to turn it from a scarcely habitable house into a dream home thanks to the architect's guidance. My belief in familial commitments was symbolized by paint, and then came that fatal meal. When my parents gave my sister Alice a wedding gift in my house before I. Please hit like and subscribe and let me know where I may share how I made my parents' betrayal their worst nightmare. You're watching because, believe me, you'll want to hear how this tale turns out. I should have documented everything back then, but when you are interacting with family, particularly your parents, you usually believe what they say, therefore that was my first error when the house entered our family. The real estate market crashed precisely 10 years ago, and my parents spotted a chance to make a real estate investment while prices were at an all-time low. They discovered this decently located 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home that required substantial maintenance. The foundation was sound, but everything else was blatantly neglected, with water damage, peeling wallpaper, and other issues. We bought it at a great price, even though the carpets and ceilings should have been condemned. At Sunday dinner, after I had just landed, my father boasted that he would fix it up and flip it once the market recovered. I was living in a small apartment with exorbitant rent at my first job at an architectural firm when I spotted an opening and took it. Let me rent it from you, and I said I would gradually repair it up. My father nodded, which makes sense, after my parents looked at each other, so perhaps I could buy it from you eventually. Since you will be enhancing the property, pay us less than market value each month. Property, and sure, we can talk about you buying it when the time is appropriate. We shook hands, and I moved in. Mom added, "This could be your starter home, Jessica, a good investment for your future." The house was in worse shape than I had anticipated when I started what would turn out to be a 10-year labor of love the next month. At first believed that the plumbing and electrical wiring were hazardous and out of date. The kitchen contained 1970s-era equipment that were leaking in 3 distinct locations. That hardly worked, but where others saw issues, I saw opportunity. Began modestly, replacing the most hazardous electrical outlets and repairing the worst of them with my first few paychecks. The plumbing problems each month, I set aside a portion of my income for home renovations, and I discovered other fixes myself by viewing innumerable do-it-yourself videos and speaking with coworkers. By the end of the first year, I had replaced everyone who had building expertise. Over the course of 6 laborious weekends, I laid the hardwood floors and carpets myself. The next year, I completely renovated I designed the kitchen and made the main bathroom a spa-like hideaway with a custom vanity and rainfall shower. Renovations took place in year 3, when I got my first big. Eventually, I bought quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, and personalized. After the renovations, my parents came to look at the cabinetry and were impressed. My father, who has a keen sense of design, remarked as he ran his palm over the new countertop that it adds significant value to the land my mother mentioned, but I thought her tone was odd. That I was unable to fully recognize at the time, but as the years went by, I made more progress and converted the incomplete. I converted the basement into a guest bedroom and home office, and I replaced the roof after I planned and constructed solar panels to save energy expenses after a particularly bad storm caused minor leaks. A lovely deck in the backyard that's ideal for morning coffee and summer cookouts. In total, I contributed more than $75,000 of my own funds to the house, not included. Despite the many hours of personal work, I never saw an increase in my rent payments to my parents, which I interpreted as their tacit support. Given my advancements and recognition of the significant value I was contributing to their investment during this period, my connection with my younger sister Allison continued to follow the same pattern since we were little. She was the kid of the family at the age of 27, 5 years my junior, and had consistently been the preferred child while Allison received complete parental funding for her education, whereas I was expected to work through college and obtain scholarships. After graduating, she struggled to find her path, and my parents helped her through 3. I never disliked their many career endeavors since they never encouraged her to stand on her own 2 feet the way they had with me. Different treatment too much because I was proud of my independence and work ethic in addition to having what I desired. Lovely house that I was constructing with the knowledge that it would one day be formally mine. Allison met Bradley Wilson, who hailed from old money, at a charity gala 2 years ago. His family had a series of upscale hotels all over the nation, and their bond grew swiftly. 6 months ago, the engagement was announced along with a diamond ring that Most likely cost more than the sum of my wedding preparations and all of my home improvements. Swiftly transformed into a lavish destination bachelor and bachelorette party with 500 attendees. My folks appeared oddly surprised when a luxury garment arrived from Paris over the weekend. Invested in the wedding specifics, which surprised me considering how pragmatically they usually handle money. About 3 months ago, the first big warning flag appeared when my parents began paying unexpected house calls to see how things were going. They would offer feedback on particular elements, such as the bespoke bookcases in the dining room and the crown molding I had put. The living room's mature vegetation, which I had tended to over the years. Truly changed this place, my mother remarked during one of those visits, surveying the area with a critical eye that made. My father questioned me again, in a tone that was too casual, "Are you planning to stay here long term?" which made me uneasy. Naturally, I responded that we had always discussed my someday purchasing it, and I was. Believing that we could begin talking about terms soon, he responded dismissively, "Yes, yes. Hurry up and aid your family because such remarks will come back to haunt you." A few weeks later, I received an invitation to my parents' house for dinner. Crucial news to relay by text from my mother's family meal this Friday at 7 o'clock. Bradley and Allison would be joining us. I arrived on time, bringing a bottle of wine, as I normally did, but as soon as I entered the room, I realized something wasn't right. A bottle of fine china, which is reserved for important announcements and major holidays, was placed on the table. Am I the last one here? I asked as pricey champagne rested in an ice bucket. My mother said, "Allison and Bradley are running late," after observing that there were no other automobiles in the driveway. The alcohol out of my hands while grinning tightly, they advised me to begin without them. As he poured me a glass of wine and engaged in small talk, my father appeared particularly happy. Notwithstanding the weather, my mother constantly checking the time. There was a sense of excitement in the air that prompted. Bradley and Allison both came 30 minutes late, which made my stomach turn. Allison donned a new designer dress that I owned, and she looked put together and a little smug. Unnoticed, and Bradley wore his standard business casual outfit that. "Sorry we are late," Allison replied, adding that it most likely cost more than my monthly wage. "I'm not sorry at all, we sat down to supper since the traffic was awful." The parents' lavish lunch served throughout the event further indicated that this was not your typical family gathering. Conversations about the appetizer and main course remained surface-level wedding preparations. Bradley recently promoted the unusually warm springtime temperatures. The true reason for the dinner didn't become apparent until my father opened the champagne. "We have fantastic news to share," my father said, filling everyone's flutes while staying upright. My mother, who you know as Allison, is beaming next to him at the head of the table. "And your mother and I wanted to give them something genuinely unique to begin their journey together as Bradley's wedding draws near." My mother entered married life, and family customs and legacies are quite significant to us, so my dad kept lifting his glass, and we made the decision to offer Allison and Bradley the house as a wedding gift. The room appeared to slant sideways as I took in what he was saying. I was positive that I had. I inquired which house, but my voice seemed far away from my own ears. Father's expression, which was a strange blend of power and unpleasant discomfort, was fixed on me. "Naturally, our home, where you have been residing, is what we believe it to be." My mother quickly added that it's in a great school district, ideal for them to raise a family, and withal, you have 30 days to find a new place to live when your lovely renovations are ready for occupancy. When my father spoke, his tone abruptly became serious, which should be plenty of time to celebrate your sister. My mother reprimanded me after clearly observing my astonishment. With a startled expression, Allison reached out and squeezed my hand. "Brad and I are really thrilled, Jess, and we already have ideas for transforming your workplace into a nursery." Bradley nodded with a well-practiced look of pity. "If I have a number of real estate contacts who can assist you in finding an apartment, consider it my treat." Chilled champagne unopened while I relived the memories, signing the my father's handshake during the initial rental arrangement promised that I may purchase the property after years of weekends focused on remodeling the kitchen, where I created a garden from seedlings that now offered privacy and shade, and had thrown innumerable dinner parties in the unique alcove beneath the stairs, which I turned into a reading nook. I was finally able to inquire about all of the money I had invested. Without accounting for my labor, my father waved his hand to show $75,000 in improvements. "Disrespectfully, I have paid rent for 10 years that you have resided there. I fixed the monthly sensation of heat rising in my cheeks below their market value. Mom said, "I can't believe this," in response to the improvements you've made to the family. We came to an arrangement, barely audible above a whisper, that I would be given the chance to purchase the house plans. Shift, my dad firmly stated that this is best for the family. Now Allison. I knew you would make this challenging, Jess. You've owned the house for 10 years. Now it's my turn. Could you please simply be pleased for me now? Bradley cleared his mouth about money. Are a worry, Jessica, I'd be pleased to pay for your moving costs. His condescension was the last straw, so I put my napkin over it. At least we can do that. The table and got up. I have to leave, I said, just because you haven't touched your dessert, but my mother objected, saying, I'm not hungry anymore. I grabbed my purse in response. And it seems that I left my house even though they urged me to return and be reasonable. I drove home to in a flash of surprise and not anger, the house that was ostensibly no longer mine passed. I stopped in the driveway and gazed at the front porch, which I had personally restored 3 summers prior. Tears came, and I was so angry that I gave myself exactly 5 minutes to. Weeping, I wiped my face and entered the home with renewed resolve. Observing everything I had made, everything I had constructed, I made a. They expected me to make the choice that I would not become a victim in this story this time. They didn't know what was going to happen, so they packed everything and left when I called in the following morning. For the first time in 3 years, I was too unwell to work, and this predicament demanded my whole focus. My immediate reaction was to scream at my parents on the phone, but I've learned from years of working with challenging clients that emotion rarely prevails. I made my first call to Laura Hayes, a real battles information and strategy expert. She agreed to visit me that afternoon to help me sort everything out after a colleague recommended an estate lawyer. After I described my circumstances, Laura remarked, "You have been paying rent and providing significant upgrades to this property for 10 years under a verbal contract that you would eventually have the chance to buy it." "Yes," I said, "but I didn't provide any written confirmation of the future purchase, but I have proof of every rent payment and renovation." Laura slapped her pen against. "Unjust enrichment is more widespread than you might imagine," according to her legal pad. I shook my head. "It is a legal theory that prohibits individuals from making unjust profits. Simply put, your parents are unable to take the benefits at another person's expense of your enhancements without payment, particularly if they made you think." For the first time since the meal, I realized that the house would someday be yours. A glimpse of hope, I inquired about tenant rights, which vary depending on the rental agreement, although in this state, even in the absence of a legally recognized lease, tenant gives you certain safeguards. They can't simply kick you out with 30 days' notice without reason. Laura asked for copies of all my rent payment records, improvement receipts, before and after pictures, or any. I spent the next 2 days sorting any emails or texts that might mention our verbal agreement. When I looked through county records to compile this information chronologically, I found something surprising. I discovered that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their principal home to cover the initial purchase price. Home 6 months prior, which aligned with Allison's engagement, and when the extravagant wedding preparations began, more research showed that my father's investment portfolio had taken significant losses over the previous 12 months, with his retirement fund losing about 30% of. Due to the costly wedding and resulting financial losses, my parents were in a difficult situation. Dangerous position. They weren't just showing partiality by giving away my house. 3 days after they were resolving their own financial issues, the last piece of the puzzle came together when my mother unintentionally sent me a chain of emails that were obviously intended for my father, but only the chain itself. Prior communications from 7 months ago that were sent soon after between Allison and my parents. Allison had written, "Brad's parents are engaged. How about giving us Jesse's house as a wedding present? It would be embarrassing if you people had just given us a toaster or something instead of that absurd financial gift. In addition, Jess has had it for a very long time, and it's not as though her family needs." My mother responded, "That isn't a horrible idea at all, your father and in any case, I have been discussing downsizing, and we may utilize the equity that has been released while considering the difficulties." I printed the complete email exchange and included it in my expanding collection of proof that I required responses straight from the source, so I decided to take my mom out for coffee in a public setting to reduce the Possibility of a scene. I believe you should give me an explanation for what I stated after we placed our order. The true reason why my mother sighed was because she appeared to be older than her 62 years. Jessica, I understand that you're upset, but families support one another. Your father and I have always taken care of both of us. Daughters, is that why you're evicting me from my house so you can support me? Ultimately, we must base our decisions on what is best for the entire family, including yours. I questioned directly about her financial position, and her eyes widened a little. What do you? I am aware of the second mortgage, Mom, and I am aware that Dad's investments have been. My mother's money is the reason I'm struggling, not family customs. Face hardened, you don't have the authority to look into our financial situation since we have done for you. What specifically have you done for me recently, as you have just made me feel destitute while giving Allison a property valued at least $400,000. Has never in her life had to struggle for anything unjust. We handed you a housing for 10 years, I paid the rent for 10 years, I added, and I fixed. Substantial return on your investment, which you are now giving to Allison without even saying thank you. My mother picked up her handbag and got to her feet. I thought you would be more sympathetic. Jessica, Allison deserves this start in life because you've always been so self-sufficient. More than you do. As she left, I became aware of how completely my family had rewrote history to support their claims that I was the strong, self-reliant daughter who did not need aid, whereas Allison, even after getting married, was always in need of help. While rumors circulated around the family, the isolation increased as my aunt phoned. My cousin texted me to tell me that I was being self-centered and that I should stop being a baby and get friends and a home of my own. Seems split, with some endorsing my indignation and others arguing that I should just be the greater person and move on. One well-meaning acquaintance claimed that a house was worth demolishing, but family is family. Relationships are no longer about the house, as I attempted to clarify. About honesty, justice, and respect. As the days went by, the betrayal became more profound. Realizing that my position in my family had always been conditional was more significant than simply losing my house. Secondary and eventually disposable. 2 weeks following the announcement of the dinner, I arranged for a qualified contractor to inspect the house and record all of the improvements I had made. Martin Cooper had 30 years of experience as a licensed home inspector and contractor, and he often worked as an. Martin said, "This is impressive work, expert witness in real estate disputes." For 3 hours, Martin, the craftsmanship on these built-ins was of professional quality as we went from room to room. Everything from the kitchen remodeling was inspected, captured on camera, and documented. He took note of the age and state of each change I made to the unique lights I had placed throughout the property, measuring and taking thorough notes based on the effort, materials, and the. In the present market, these upgrades are worth about $98,000. Martin finished by presenting me with his draft report, which does not take into consideration the rising value of the property. The house is at least worth the significant modifications that have been made. I paid Martin more to speed up his final because of your improvements, which increased it by 30%. Report along with the accompanying materials I uploaded to my expanding file for my upcoming. The first step was speaking with family law specialist Diane Reynolds. Given the particular difficulties of my case and the strength of the unjust enrichment argument, Laura had suggested her. Verified after looking over my records, but there are other factors to take into account. Did your parents ever file? I took care of all the necessary permissions for these modifications, explaining everything. There are the required permits and inspections for big renovations. Good, and did they? Have you ever registered the property with the county as a rental? I blinked. I don't have any. Let's discover what Diane stated while entering some data into her computer. She smiled slightly as she looked up a few minutes later, but they didn't open up. Unpaid rental taxes and probable insurance violations under their homeowner's policy could be further problems for them. The strategy session with Diane produced a clear plan file for unjust enrichment, but it does not cover rental properties. Seek an urgent injunction to stop the transfer of property until the matter is settled, and get ready for either. Diane cautioned that family lawsuits can become ugly, so be ready for a settlement or court battle. Are you sure you want to move forward right away? I strongly stated that this is not simply regarding money, it's about defending myself after years of being exploited when I wasn't meeting with. I devoted hours to studying property laws, whether it was through lawyers or document collection. and rules, I found that a number of my enhancements, particularly in addition to the building permits I already had for the deck addition and basement conversion, revaluation of the property for tax purposes, which my parents, the owners, ought to have started, but never did, and I discovered that they broke the law by neglecting to register the property as a rental unit. County regulations and may lead to penalties that go back to the start of our agreement, as well as tax ramifications were noteworthy in and of themselves. They had been deducting mortgage interest without disclosing rental income. The psychological toll of these revelations and the ongoing legal disputes started to interfere with my day-to-day existence. Having my first panic attack while going through old photos of family get-togethers that had happened at home. Holidays, birthdays, and events where I hosted while Allison and my parents performed. Family sleepless evenings became the norm, and the only positive thing was that I shed 5 pounds in just 2 weeks. Place was my friend Madison's steadfast assistance, who frequently brought over supper and listened to my Madison's ideas regarding family betrayal became more and more fragmented. "You need to talk to someone professional," she finally said. Insisted on organizing my file box for the 3rd time after discovering me at 2 a.m., saying, "This is too much to process alone." She was accurate. I started attending Dr. Carter, a therapist specializing in family trauma, who helped me understand that my reaction was not just about losing a. My father laughed and said, "This is about money. You want us to buy you off." I apologized, but sure, monetary compensation would be suitable. The situation and the amount of money my father demanded to get this resolved. Allison abruptly stood up before I could respond. "I can't believe this. Jessica, you have always been envious of me, and now you're attempting to spoil the most important time in." I repeated incredulously, "My life is jealous. I have never been angry with you, Allison. Anything, but I constructed this house, made it what it is, and it is my home. And I took action on the basis of something I never even wanted, promises that are now being shattered." Allison yelled, her face twisted in unexpected anger. "That dumb place. It was. Mom and Dad's suggestion, they claimed, would take care of everything and give us a place to stay for our wedding. Live and they may finally put you in your place." As everyone processed her scream, the room fell silent. I said, "Me in my place," and my mother's face turned pale. "Allison, we didn't say that." "Yes, it is. You mentioned Jessica always acts like outstanding in her work and self-reliance, and it was time for her to learn. You claimed that since family comes first, gifting me the house will serve as a reminder to her that she is not unique simply because she can hang some." Allison, Shelves Bradley appeared uneasy. "Perhaps we should not." Interrupted, "I'm sick of acting like I don't want Jessica's house. Everyone usually compliments her on her priceless renovations, but Mom, to pay for the wedding and have enough money left over to move in with us after the honeymoon, Dad and I must sell their house." Until they were able to afford a smaller property, and then the whole truth was revealed. My house was being made sacrifices to address my parents' financial issues and retirement plans in addition to Allison's benefit. While my father looked at Allison in disbelief, my mother put her head in her hands. Harold Wilson clarified his throat, and since they went, I believe Bradley and I should go outside for a bit. I got my paperwork together and got up to file the injunction tomorrow morning. My lawyer will contact you. Regarding settlement alternatives, I left without turning around since, in spite of the chaos, I felt oddly at ease. Behind me, the truth had finally been revealed, and even in the middle of the chaos, there was a sense of liberation in that. As promised, I filed the legal documents the following morning after Diane's planned everything beforehand, and a temporary injunction was issued within 3 days. Granted, halting any property transfer until our case could be heard. The first court date was scheduled for 3 weeks following my initial proposal and weeks after Allison's wedding date. The judge's decision said that the existing living arrangement was to be maintained until the eviction date. When I texted my parents to let them know the court date prior to the hearing, my father's only reply was, "We have. I hope you are satisfied because your greed forced us to engage a counsel we cannot afford." I wasn't satisfied. I was worn out, wounded, and growing more unsure of what winning might truly entail. The house no longer felt as though every nook and cranny of the once sanctuary had poisoned memories. 3 days after submitting the injunction, I unexpectedly received a call about betrayal. "This is your grandmother, Jessica." I didn't recognize the number. I hadn't spoken to my grandma in almost 2 years. "Ella Laner, your father's mother." Grandma resided in Arizona for many years, and because of her health, she didn't travel much. I just heard from you, she responded firmly, everything okay? No, it is not. My heart fell once again when I had to talk to you personally about this absurd situation with the house, Father. A family member is calling to try to get me to change my mind. What has he said? Cautiously questioned that you are attempting to destroy their reputation and that you are suing them over property that has always been theirs. Your sister's wedding, but since I knew your father, I had a sneaking suspicion there was more to it. I was shocked to learn after hearing my version of events, this is exactly what happened with your aunt. My grandmother did not take my parents' side. Sighing sadly, she said, Margaret, your father and his sister are always the same pattern. One youngster is identified as the responsible one who doesn't require assistance, but other people who are constantly pampered. I was unaware that it also occurred in my generation. I was taken aback by this introduction to family history that I had never heard of. Naturally, nobody discusses it. She paused before continuing, saying, Jessica, there's something else you ought to be aware that the house was never intended to be solely an investment property owned by your parents. What do you mean? The money utilized to buy that house came from your grandfather's inheritance. Howard left money exclusively to be used for. You and Allison benefited from both of his granddaughters, and the funds were divided equally. Directions that should assist you both in establishing yourself. When the time came, I thought the floor had fallen out from under me? Do you mean that I'm implying that you should have been given half of that house from? Your parents were initially expected to manage that money until you were well established in your profession, and I thought they had informed you that you were prepared to buy a home years ago when you moved in, but I found it difficult to accept this new information. I have a copy of Howard's will and the trust. Do you have any more records of this arrangement? As promised, by the evening, I had copies of the documents, which I will email to you today. Of my grandfather's will explicitly specifying that the future housing of both grandchildren was to be funded equally. Necessities. Upon receiving the money I sent, my father even signed a statement accepting these terms. Diane called me right thereafter and told me that everything had changed. This is no longer simply unjust enrichment, this could be a breach of your parents' fiduciary obligation. Was required by law to notify you of your inheritance from my grandmother's. My grandmother even provided unanticipated assistance and the fresh evidence that significantly improved our legal case. Money to cover my legal bills, even though I told her that my funds could pay the expenses. It's about finally, not about the money she demanded on. Someone has to take a position and say enough once a week to break this family trend. My father's lawyer called me ahead of the court date to suggest a settlement conference. My parents appeared dejected when Diane and I arrived at the lawyer's office. As grew older, my father was hardly able to look at me. Their lawyer offered to give me $50,000 as. Diane shook her head, saying that the money for the modifications would be paid in monthly installments over a period of 5 years. The offer does not reflect the actual value of the changes after 2 years, nor does it solve the inheritance issue. After many heated hours of discussion, we decided that my parents would reimburse me $120,000, which is the initial bequest of my grandfather after inflation plus. They would use a promissory note secured by their new property to partially compensate for upgrades. Payments to start right away. We'll have to reduce our budget more than we anticipated. As he signed the contract, my father resentfully remarked, You ought to have considered that before handing away something that was initially partially mine. I retorted, not feeling content with their discomfort, just a profound regret that things had reached this point for Allison's. The wedding went according to plan, although there were some apparent modifications to the guest list. Was halved, the location was degraded, and the Parisian gown was swapped for an off-the-rack item that Bradley's parents provided to pay for additional costs, but my grandma, who went, said there was a. The most revealing sign of the family's unique coolness was that my invitation never came. I wasn't shocked, but Bradley's official excommunication still hurt, according to my grandmother. Appeared more uneasy during the festivities, especially when family members inquired about the circumstances at home and got well-prepared answers from my parents using the settlement funds. Reassured, I started searching for a home of my own in an area with solid bones that required affection, but this time I discovered a place where I could be sure of possession. I made an offer that was approved for a good craftsman cottage in a neighborhood I had always enjoyed. My grandmother and I had a friendship that blossomed in unexpected ways. talking once a week and stopping by when she had a doctor's appointment in town. She told me family tales I had never heard before, which helped me spot trends. She informed me over tea in my soon-to-be home that your grandfather would be proud of you because that had been invisible to me before. Fairness was his top priority at his previous house, which is why he was so particular in. What surprised me the most was a text message I got from Allison around 2 months after her wedding asking if we could speak without. Knowing that we met at a coffee shop midway between our houses, Mom and Dad appeared more human, less polished, and I want to apologize for that. After we had agreed on our beverages, she stated not only for the house but also for everything, for allowing them to take advantage of you and never defending you. Regard us so differently that I'm now dubious of her unexpected realization, Bradley. And I've been receiving counseling. She acknowledged that he was quite troubled by what had transpired, saying his family would never be so cruel to siblings, and it caused him to wonder what sort of. She hesitated, wondering what type of wife I would be if I married into the family he had. I assumed that conduct was typical, so I just nodded as I was at a loss for words. She went on to say that your parents are upset with you and that they had to sell their home and go to a condo that is half as big. Dad accuses you of destroying their retirement plans, which included stealing something that was initially partially mine. I made it clear that I am aware of. Grandma Eleanor glanced down at her coffee and told me everything, but I don't. I hope you will pardon me, but I wanted to let you know that I'm attempting to comprehend my role in this. Not quite reconciliation, but it was a small rift in the family story that had shaped who we were. For a very long time, the settlement funds and my savings enabled me to make a sizable down payment on although my new home was smaller than the one I had occupied for 10 years, it seemed more like mine than the other house had ever felt when I signed the papers. The Craftsman cottage needed renovations, the lawn was overgrown, the bathroom was small, and the kitchen was old. Every advancement over time would definitely raise my personal equity, not someone else's. Precisely 6 months after that tragic event, I closed on the house. The timing of the family dinner seemed to represent the Earth's whole half-revolution, circling the sun, because my parents and I were still at odds and they turned down my lawyer's recommendation of family therapy rather than sticking to their story that I had behaved selfishly, and my grandmother claims that they have irreparably ruined the family because they hardly ever bring me up at family events, and when the final legal documents arrived, they were accompanied by the irate parents who had been hurt by an unappreciative youngster. The property transaction was finalized 3 weeks after I moved into my new residence, formally sold to a young couple who had nothing to do with the problems in our family. I felt seeing the final remarks condense 10 years of my life into legalese and monetary signs made me sad. Allison and I continued to communicate occasionally but cautiously. Would never be what it may have been, but we had a newfound candor that she brought to our relationship. Revealed that the strain of financial obligations and family expectations was causing her marriage to suffer. Everything she told me during one of our rare conversations has been viewed by Bradley's parents. Coffee dates and constant comparisons between what his parents provide for us and what they are unable to provide. That seems challenging, I replied, finding myself in the unforeseen situation of. My sister acknowledged that it is exhausting to sympathize with her, and sometimes I wish. Like you, we had recently eloped and purchased a modest starter home. Stopped, then added, as you always do, crafting those words in your own unique way. Something that I had not recognized was still raw in me was healed by such casual speech. My grandma Eleanor and I chatted once a week, and she came to visit my new house, and our friendship grew into something priceless. I had never seen my grandfather's craftsmanship before, but when her health allowed her, she brought housewarming presents and family photos. Small antiques and tools that Howard would have shared years ago. She ran her palm over a shelf I had constructed with his tools and remarked, "I love what you are doing with this place." Believed in building lasting things, and as a result, my career flourished. My employer, an architectural business, appreciated the first-hand renovation and elevated me to senior designer. Expertise I contributed to residential projects. I was an expert in carefully remodeling existing homes. Others recognized the most surprising potential and assets that others had overlooked. I hired a landscaper to assist tame the overgrown areas 8 months after I moved into my new house. Ryan Turner showed up in my backyard with referrals from neighbors and a calm professionalism that instantly put me at ease. "This garden has good bones," he observed, repeating what I frequently say regarding buildings that were purposefully planted here but only required upkeep. What started out as a business partnership progressively turned into a friendship and ultimately into something. Ryan had a deeper understanding of respect and boundaries than my family had. Valued my liberty while providing undemanding support. I love that you are aware of your true self. One evening, as we were sitting on my recently remodeled porch, he reminded me that you stood up for yourself even if it meant paying a price. I had my first significant party a year after I moved into my new house. Housewarming celebration that represented far more than merely a new address for me. Madison, her grandma, and other devoted friends arrived, but Allison arrived by herself. Due to Bradley's favorable work schedule, my parents were invited but chose not to come, standing in my. Although my kitchen is smaller than it was before, it is definitely mine. I was amazed with how my idea of family had evolved significantly, and those around me were now related not only by blood but also by respect and choice. Duty, the most profound lesson in all of this, had nothing to do with property rights or family relationships, even though I was well versed in both, but it was about the liberation that comes from defending yourself, particularly when those closest to you anticipate that you will fold for. For years, I had embraced my assigned role as the self-reliant, strong daughter who. It was unpleasant but vital to break free from that narrative. I needed less, deserved less, and should contribute more. I now realize that family is based on respect for one another, not only genetics. Demands clear communication, healthy limits, and the guts to speak up when those boundaries are violated. The most affectionate thing you can do for both yourself and other people is to eliminate harmful habits that have existed for many generations. The house I lost drove me to uncover who I am, and ultimately, that was the most significant finding. What about? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to confront family members who exploited your generosity? Circumstance when it was essential but challenging to set limits with loved ones. If this tale spoke to you, please hit like and subscribe. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Tell someone who would benefit from hearing that advocating for oneself is not selfish, rather, it is necessary. Thank you for hearing about my trip, and keep in mind that real family encourages your development rather than your selflessness.